Introduction to Pirkei Avos. We're starting a new series now on Pirkei Avos. It's the Tkuf at the time that Klal Yisrael engages in the limud of Pirkei Avos throughout the spring and summer months. And we're commencing a new series now on Pirkei Avos. Introduction to Pirkei Avos. Which Avos? When we say Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our fathers, which fathers are we referring to? Pirkei Avos begins with Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, Sorah Yeshua, that there's the transmission of the Torah from Har Sinai, Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshua, the Zakenim, and throughout the generations. The question is asked, why does Pirkei Avos start with Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai? And the Bartanur explains that a person might think that, well, this is a Masechta that deals with ethics, that deals with midas tovas, ethics, and every nation has their rules and their set of morality and conduct, their what's acceptable, their ethics and their manner of acting, and what's acceptable, their etiquette. And one might think that this is also just a collection of the morality that the Chachamim bodu miliban, what they thought and they came up with on their own. Lahavdil, like every nation, like all societies, they have the rules of conduct. Now, their rules of conduct changes constantly. Every generation, even nowadays, every year, every several years, there's new changes, dramatic changes, drastic changes. What was acceptable a couple of years ago, today is not acceptable. What was considered moral and ethical several years ago is today considered to be almost a crime. What was considered a crime several years ago is today by them considered to be ethical. But our rules of conduct, our morality, our midas are a Kabbalah from Har Sinai. They're transmitted. These are eternal. Our ethics, our morality, our rules of conduct are eternal. So that's why it begins, Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai, that we should know that these midas that we're discussing in this Masechta, these midas are Misinai. They're eternal. And that's why it begins with this introduction. And according to the Bartanura, this means that it was part of the ethics, part of the midas from Sinai. And as Rashi explains at the end of the Masechta, that the Avos, when we refer to the Avos over here, we're referring to the Avos, the pillars, the foundations of our Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu, Yeshua, Zakenim. These are the Avos that we're referring to. As opposed to normally when we talk about Avos, it's Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Here we're talking about the Avos, those foundations of the transmission of the Torah. And that's what this Masechta is about. Midas tovas, morality, conduct, ethics, that were passed down from generation to generation from Har Sinai. But perhaps there's another explanation that retains the meaning of Avos in the traditional sense, in the sense that we're accustomed to. Maseches Avos, Pirkei Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the Avos of Klal Yisrael. Now, what does this Masechta, the Midas Tovas, what does that have to do with Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? True, of course, they were the foundation of Midas Tovas. But how does that reflect itself in this Masechta? And perhaps the pshat is that the midas that Klal Yisrael have, these midas, these character traits, are not only things that we learn. And they're not only rules of conduct that we accept and we live our lives by, but they're also midos that are ingrained in us, midos that are part of our very fabric. They're midos that are part and parcel of our whole essence, because these midos we learn, we study, we follow, but they're also ingrained in us. They're also part of our essence. It's part of who we are, because we are the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And those midas tovos that they were moser nefesh for, and those midas tovos that they were the outstanding examples of midas tovos in the world, and they brought those midas tovos to the world. They were passed down to us from generation to generation. And it's not only what we learn, and certainly is what we learn, and we chazer, and we review, and we try to apply to ourselves, but we have it ingrained in us. We have that innate ability to conduct ourselves with those midas tovos. Like Rav Chaim Volozhin explains, he says that you find throughout generations that Klal Yisrael were able to be moser nefesh al Kiddush Hashem. Now we talk about the Akedas Yitzchak. We talk about the Mesiras Nefesh of Akedas Yitzchak, which was surely one of the greatest episodes of human conduct, examples of human conduct. But throughout the generations, Yidden have always been willing to enable and demonstrate Mesiras Nefesh. Dr. Chaim Volozhin, but that comes from Yitzchak. That ability to be Moser Nefesh, that we inherited from Yitzchak Avinu. And those midas that we have, the midas of chesed, the midas of gvura, the midas of emes, all of those outstanding, incredible midas that Klal Yisrael has, they have ingrained them. It's natural, it's part of their essence, it's part of their mahus, it's part of who and what we are, because we are the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. This is the Masechta of Avot. This is Pirkei Avot. It's the midas that we learn. It's the midas that were passed down from generation to generation. It was transmitted. Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. These are also midas that we have the capability of taking upon ourselves and conducting ourselves with, because it's part of who we are, it's part of what we yarshin, it's part of what we inherited from our avos. So sometimes it may seem like a daunting task to live a life up to these standards, the standards of these midas, but it's something that we're uniquely capable and have the ability of performing and carrying out, because we are Bnei Yisrael, we are the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. It brings to mind an incident that happened not long ago. There was an invitation. We invited one of the leading Rosh Yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael to come and join us for the Dirshu convention that took place recently, just a couple of months ago. And he was very enthusiastic about joining, and he wanted very much to come. And he says, I'm happy to come, I want to come, I'm happy to come, but give me a few days. Give me a few days and I'll get back to you. We asked, of course, but what is the purpose of this few days that the Rosh Yeshiva is requesting? And he said, it's 100% mitzidi that I want to come, and I'm going to come. Now this Rosh Yeshiva is a middle-aged person. And he said, however, and give me a few days because I have to consult, I have to ask my father. His father's in his late 80s or early 90s. But I have to ask my father. Now, this Rosh Yeshiva is a gadol. He is a person full of koyach and full of self-confidence, and he is a gavra rabbah. He's a gavra rabbah. In every sense, decisive and strong opinions and deyas. He's a gavra rabbah. He has to ask his father. Because we know, Klal Yisrael, we know that where we come from, and we enforce where we come from, and where our midas come from, and our deyas come from, and who we are and what we are, it comes from our avos. And we're learning Pirkei Avos to emulate our avos, to carry out that tradition and what was transmitted to us. They're not midas that were made up from a vacuum. They're not midas that came about on their own. They're not midas that change from generation to generation and at the whim of the social norms and the style of the day. They're eternal. They're from Sinai. They're the midas that are ingrained in us from our avos, that are part and parcel and the makeup of who we are, and we should be zoicha. We should be zoicha to be able to follow in their footsteps, emulate them, and live lives based on these midas.